Imagine waking up to a single headline that seems to fold the world in on itself. A youthful, controversial leader from West Africa announces a dramatic plan to rescue a South Asian nation from devastating floods. The claim sounds like the opening scene of a geopolitical drama. It also sounds impossible. In this video, I will walk you through everything that matters about that headline. I will separate what is verifiable from what is viral, explain the humanitarian reality on the ground in the affected country, explore who the leader is and what he can realistically do, and lay out the logistics, law, politics, and moral questions behind any cross-border rescue. I will show you the small, urgent human needs that decide whether aid helps or harms, and I will leave you with concrete questions to answer in the comments so this conversation becomes a community of informed viewers rather than a feed of speculation. The first truth is simple and stark. The floods are real and they are severe. Rivers that normally follow familiar channels have risen far beyond their banks. Entire communities are leaving everything they own and moving to higher ground. Roads have been torn open, bridges have been crippled, and rescue teams are racing to find isolated families before illness and exposure spread. The scale of the emergency means that immediate life-saving assistance is the priority, moving people out of harm's way, setting up safe shelters, treating acute injuries, and preventing waterborne disease outbreaks that usually follow major floods. This is not a distant abstract problem, it is a present, human disaster that demands effective and coordinated response. To understand how a claim about an unusual foreign rescue arises, we need to know who the foreign leader is and what his public profile looks like. He is a military officer who rose quickly to authority in his country during a period of political turbulence. He is young compared with most heads of state and known for direct rhetoric, a confrontational posture toward traditional powers, and a certain charisma among segments of his domestic audience. He has become a symbol for some people who want to see bold alternatives to the established order. That biography explains why his name is attached to striking claims on social media. When a figure like that speaks, or when a dramatic video appears with his image, it travels fast and becomes part fact and part mythology in the public imagination. But headlines and viral clips are not the same as formal, verified actions. Many attention-grabbing posts online use sensational language to trigger shares. Some use manipulated audio or video to create an impression that a leader said something on the record when he did not. Others amplify unverified statements through networks of sympathetic accounts. The upshot is this: extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. A claim that a distant leader has mounted a cross-continental rescue must be backed by official statements, documented shipments, and confirmation from organizations that actually manage humanitarian operations. Without that confirmation, the claim is better treated as a subject for careful analysis than as a factual report to be accepted without question. Let us imagine, for the sake of analysis, what a serious, competent rescue effort would actually demand. The immediate life-saving phase needs boats, helicopters, trained search and rescue personnel, mobile medical facilities, and reliable sources of clean water. Delivering any of these items into a flood zone requires staging areas, customs clearances, fuel, and secure transport corridors. Rescue helicopters need landing zones and fuel logistics no matter where they come from. Heavy equipment like temporary bridges or water pumps require sea or air transport and often heavy lifting gear to unload and move them into place. None of this happens without local coordination and the consent of the government where the disaster is unfolding. Beyond immediate rescue, sanitation and public health are critical. Flood water carries bacteria, human waste, and chemical contaminants. Mobile water treatment units and emergency vaccination campaigns prevent outbreaks. Medical teams must treat injuries and chronic conditions that are disrupted by the disaster. That takes epidemiologists, public health coordinators, and the data systems to map where people are sheltering and what services are missing. Technology, such as satellite imagery and mapping tools, helps locate needs, but it cannot replace trusted local partners who know the terrain and the community. Then there is shelter and food security. Displaced families need safe places that protect them from rain, heat, and cold, and they need culturally appropriate food and cooking facilities. Cash assistance can be an effective tool in many contexts because it gives families autonomy and stimulates local markets, but it requires functioning financial systems and safeguards to ensure aid reaches those who need it most. Distribution plans must be careful to avoid creating new inequalities or exposing vulnerable groups to exploitation. Engineering work is another major piece. Shoring up embankments, repairing damaged water infrastructure, clearing clogged irrigation channels, and restoring critical pumps and electricity are technical tasks that require engineers, heavy machinery, and local labor. These activities often need environmental assessments and permits because rivers are part of larger transboundary basins. Any intervention that alters river flows has the potential to affect communities far downstream or across borders, and that is why diplomacy matters as much as bulldozers. Political and legal considerations are equally weighty. A sovereign government has the right to manage response operations on its territory. Any foreign assistance that involves military assets, or that could be perceived as a unilateral intervention, requires clear consent and close coordination. In practice, most large-scale international assistance is channeled through established humanitarian organizations and coordination mechanisms because those entities provide predictable frameworks for consent, accountability, and the prioritization of need over politics. Financial constraints shape everything. Rapid response requires immediate funds for procurement, transport, and personnel. Reconstruction and resilience building need long-term financing and careful planning to avoid rebuilding the same vulnerability. Donor funding is often conditional, and multilateral lenders and major aid organizations require rigorous oversight to prevent diversion of resources. A single leader promising to rescue another country would need to demonstrate where funds come from, how they will be delivered, and how oversight will be maintained. Without those details, a pledge is only a statement of intent. Distance itself is a practical barrier. Moving heavy equipment across continents is slower and costlier than people imagine. Sea freight takes time, airlift is expensive and limited in capacity, and both require customs and ground logistics at either end. An effective intervention tends to be one that builds on existing supply chains close to the disaster area. That is why regional cooperation and the mobilization of nearby assets are often more efficient than transcontinental showpieces. We should also consider motive and messaging. A dramatic pledge from an unexpected source can be an act of genuine solidarity, sincere political outreach, or a means of building personal prestige. Each motive colors how other governments and humanitarian organizations respond. The most constructive approach, for the people who need help, is one that prioritizes needs identified by communities and local authorities and that channels support through neutral, experienced humanitarian agencies. Human stories illustrate these abstractions. Picture a family in a riverine village whose home has been swept away. Their immediate needs are simple and urgent: a dry place to sleep, water that will not make their children sick, and food that they can actually prepare. They are not moved by grandstanding or distant rhetoric. They need reliable aid that reaches them in time and preserves their dignity. If resources are diverted into publicity rather than the relief pipeline, the harm can be direct and measurable. History offers sobering lessons. Recent major floods in the affected country had devastating economic and human consequences. Crops were destroyed, millions of people found themselves displaced, and recovery costs ran into the billions. Those events exposed weaknesses in early warning systems, watershed management, and climate resilience planning. They also highlighted the unequal burden of climate shocks. Regions that contributed least to global emissions often suffer the worst damage. Recovery plans that do not address long-term resilience risk repeating the cycle of disaster and loss. Global institutions matter. United Nations agencies, the Red Crescent, major international non-governmental organizations, and regional bodies bring experience, coordination mechanisms, and legal frameworks that make them vital partners. They have warehouses, pre-existing supply chains, and established protocols for mass displacement, disease control, and logistics. Working through these channels reduces duplication and increases the likelihood that aid will reach the most vulnerable. It also introduces transparency that donors and affected people need to build trust. So what is a realistic way forward if an external leader wants to help? The most responsible path is partnership. That could mean a formal pledge of funds routed through humanitarian coordination mechanisms, the deployment of specialist technical teams embedded within existing operations, or offers to open diplomatic channels to accelerate logistics. It can also include leveraging political capital to call for greater global assistance or to highlight climate justice arguments that attract long-term investments. In practice, effective contributions are those that respect sovereignty, coordinate with experienced agencies, and build local capacity rather than replace it. For viewers who want to think critically about viral claims, here is a practical checklist. Look for official statements from the governments involved. Check whether recognized humanitarian organizations are reporting the same claims. Ask whether logistics and financing have been specified in realistic detail. Confirm whether independent, reputable news organizations are corroborating the story. And be particularly cautious if the claim relies on a single unverified video or an account known to spread sensational content. There are ethical questions that cannot be avoided. Who should decide how aid is distributed in a sovereign nation? How do we make sure marginalized communities are not bypassed? What mechanisms prevent aid from becoming a tool of political influence? These are not theoretical issues. They determine whether assistance saves lives or chips away at social cohesion, whether it builds long-term resilience or creates dependency, and whether it helps people in the poorest communities or simply creates headlines. As we come toward the close of this deep look, let me make two central points clear. The flood emergency in the affected country is an urgent humanitarian crisis that needs coordinated, competent response from national authorities and international partners. At the same time, extraordinary claims that a single foreign leader has launched a unilateral rescue across continents should be treated with caution and examined for evidence. Where verified offers of assistance exist, they will be documented by official statements and by the organizations that manage logistical operations. Now I want to ask you to do something specific. In the comments, tell me which response you would trust most for long-term recovery: a coordinated international coalition led by established humanitarian agencies, or a surprising pledge from an unlikely leader who promises rapid independent action. Share any personal experiences you or people you know have with flood response. If you have seen effective local practices that made a real difference in recovery, tell us about them so we can all learn. If this examination was useful, please support the channel by subscribing to AfriPol Lens so that we can continue producing careful, evidence-based analysis. Like the video if you found the investigation helpful, and leave a thoughtful comment rather than a short reaction so our discussion can be constructive. Share the video with someone who cares about responsible reporting and humanitarian policy.